Donald Trump is saying that taxes on imports will free the US from reliance on foreign goods and are, quotes, reciprocal. He's describing tomorrow, when he announces more tariffs, as Liberation Day. Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent, can tell us more about this. What do we read into what he said most recently about this?
Well, I think you've got to take him seriously. I mean, he's talking about this as being Liberation Day, Sheila. It's going to create Boomtown USA. He's promising that these tariffs, even though, of course, the vast majority of Nobel Prize-winning American economists argue they will be disastrous and will simply create inflation here, are going to be a massive boon because they will result in America's the imports that the United States buys from foreign producers. It will result in those foreign producers realizing that in order to evade his tariff regime, they need to come and invest in manufacturing plants here in the United States. But we still do not know precisely what Donald Trump is going to announce tomorrow. There are reports that this is going to be an across-the-board tariff that he's going to apply against all American imports, 20% across the board. That would come as a huge disappointment to the Prime Minister. Because, of course, Jonathan Reynolds has been leading talks with the Trump administration to try and offset the worst impacts of all of this. There were reports that he was going to target initially only a small number of countries. But speaking on Air Force One over the weekend, the president appeared to deny that. You've got to strain your ears a little bit to hear this, but here was his interaction aboard the presidential jet this weekend.
You're expecting to hit something like 10 to 15 countries, is that right?
No.
All of the countries. Is it across the board?
Not 10. I don't know who told you 10 or 15 countries.
Well, we heard that. So we heard that you were going to aim for the 15%.
But you didn't hear it from me.
Okay, so how many countries will be in that initial tranche?
You'd start with all countries, so let's see what happens.
So let's see what happens, as the president says. One of his top economic advisors, Peter Navarro, is definitely talking up the prospects for tariffs.
The message is that tariffs are tax cuts, tariffs are jobs, tariffs are national security, tariffs are great for America. Tariffs will make America great again.
So is Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary.
President Trump doesn't want American industries to survive. He wants them to thrive. Wednesday will be Liberation Day in America, as President Trump has so proudly called it, because he is going to end the decades of unfair trade practices. It has hollowed out our middle class. It has turned the American heartland into an American wasteland where jobs have gone overseas.
But the president, as you know, has spoken about this concept of reciprocity and matching any tariffs that the United States is required to pay internationally with tariffs that America would charge. So let's see if he moderates all of this tomorrow. As you know, Wall Street has been having a very tough time with all of this. The S&P 500 index notching up its worst monthly performance since 2022. The White House insists that its eye is not on Wall Street but on Main Street. But as I say, the president's critics do not understand how he thinks this can do anything else but create massive amounts of inflation here in the United States and the sinking values of the 401k retirement accounts that more than 70 million Americans have, the vast majority of which are completely tied up in the stock market.
What happens when and if he's proved wrong about tariffs and they cause the damage that all of the Nobel Prize-winning American economists say they cause?
Well, I presume that we will witness the president indicating that up is down, white is black, and then rowing back in some fashion from some of the measures that he puts into place. I mean, he's certainly very unlikely, given everything that we know about Donald Trump, to put his hand up and say, I was wrong. But he may well find himself having to moderate his policies and moderate them not just in the face of the economic realities, the consequences of these tariffs, but in the face of growing anxiety among Republicans. I mean, we've already seen some fervent supporters of Donald Trump, urging him to row back, for example, on the tariffs that he's imposed against Canada. Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama says he doesn't mind any tariffs that the President of the United States wants to impose against China. But when it comes to Canada and Mexico, he thinks that the President should be wandering down a more moderate path than he has so far seen from President Trump. So, there's domestic political capital at risk in all of this as well, because all of those Republican lawmakers, they keep going back to their constituencies, to their districts over the weekend during congressional recess earlier in the year, and getting an absolute earful from people, particularly in states near the Canadian border or agricultural states that rely heavily on the rural economy. And they are being warned by their voters that prices were already rising as a result of some of the tariffs that Donald Trump implemented and then sort of rode back from. So, how determined he is really to wage this global trade war for a protracted period of time, if it leads to Wall Street just sinking and sliding and domestic opposition to him growing, that's going to be the big test of the next few weeks.
Thank you very much, Simon. Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent.